The clock ticked ominously as Leela stood frozen, the words of betrayal echoing in her mind. Her sister had stolen not just her dreams, but the man she loved. In the silence of the living room, she could see the flicker of guilt in her sister's eyes, and in that instant, everything shattered. Just last week, they had laughed over coffee, promising to support one another, but now the weight of deceit pressed down like a vice. The truth hit her like a slap. She was losing her family, her heart, her hope. My name is Leela. I never imagined love could turn so cold. I felt the ache in my chest grow heavier, a constant reminder of the tension that filled our home. When I glanced over at Ethan, I noticed his brow furrowed in confusion, but there was a flicker of something else, perhaps understanding. He had always been the protector, the one who shielded me from the storms that brewed within our family. But now I wondered if he had seen the cracks before I had. In the days that followed, I found myself gravitating toward him more than ever, clinging to the familiarity of our shared childhood memories like a lifeline in turbulent waters. We spent hours in the dim light of his room, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, as if hiding from the truth could somehow make it disappear. Ethan's presence was a comfort, but I could see the strain in his eyes as he wrestled with our father's betrayal. The betrayal loomed large, a shadow that darkened every corner of our lives. At times, I wanted to scream, to demand answers from Robert, but when I finally confronted him, words escaped me. I stared into my father's face, searching for the man I once idolized, but all I found was a hollow shell, a man who had built walls instead of bridges. The disappointment in my heart gnawed at me, turning my thoughts into a chaotic spiral that I struggled to contain. How could you? I wanted to ask, but instead, I pressed my lips together and walked away, feeling lost and bewildered. Dinner time had become a ritual of avoidance, with conversations reduced to superficial exchanges. My mother would set the table, her movements mechanical and precise, while Robert would enter with a forced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Each clink of silverware echoed in the silence, amplifying the absence of warmth that used to fill our home. I watched as Miriam's hands trembled slightly, the way she poured water into glasses, her gaze often distant, as if she were somewhere far beyond the chaos. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I felt paralyzed, unsure of how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. One evening, as we sat down for a meal, I caught Ethan's eye, and I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was. The tension was unbearable, the air thick with unsaid words and unacknowledged pain. I decided then that we needed to speak up, to confront the elephant in the room before it crushed us entirely. "Can we just talk about what's happening?" I blurted out, my voice shaking. Robert looked up, surprise etched across his features, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Miriam paused, her fork halfway to her mouth, as if she'd forgotten how to eat. "It's complicated, Leela," Robert finally said, his voice steady but lacking conviction. Complicated. The word felt like a slap in the face, trivializing the avalanche of emotions that threatened to bury us all. My heart raced as I sensed the tension building, a mixture of anger and desperation fueling my desire to push for honesty. Complicated? You call lying and breaking promises complicated? I countered, my frustration bubbling over. We're not stupid. We know something is wrong. Ethan shifted in his seat, his gaze darting from me to our parents, weighing his options, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his silent support. It was a fragile alliance, but one that reminded me we were still a team. I glanced at my mother, her face a portrait of pain and indecision. "Mom, we need you to say something," I urged, my voice softer now, a plea rather than a demand. Miriam finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just wanted to protect you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought if I kept it from you, you wouldn't have to feel the hurt." Her words sliced through me, and I could see the weight of her choices bearing down on her shoulders. But I'm hurting anyway, I replied, feeling raw and exposed. We all are. We need to face this together, not in silence. The room was thick with emotion, each word hanging heavily in the air. My mother nodded slowly, the realization dawning on her that hiding from the truth was only prolonging our suffering. "You're right, Leela," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's time we talked." As the conversation unfolded, the floodgates opened. We shared our fears and our hurts, each confession peeling back layers of denial that had built up over the years. I could see the tension in Robert's face, the way he flinched at our words. But still, he remained silent. I wanted him to speak, to acknowledge the pain he had caused, but I also knew it was a journey we had to navigate together, as a family. Ethan squeezed my hand beneath the table, a small gesture of solidarity that reminded me I wasn't alone in this. I felt a surge of determination as I realized that even amidst the chaos, there was a chance for healing. We could mend these broken pieces, but only if we faced them head-on. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would be more difficult conversations ahead. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. As we sat there, raw and vulnerable, I understood that love was not just about blissful moments. It was about weathering the storms together. About choosing to fight for each other, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was willing to take that first step, to confront the truth and reclaim the love that bound us together. As I sat in the dimly lit living room, the weight of the evening pressed heavily on my shoulders. The quiet hum of the ticking clock felt like a reminder that time was slipping away from us, yet the moments we shared seemed to stretch infinitely in the tension that hung in the air. I glanced over at Ethan, who was lost in his own thoughts, his brow furrowed in contemplation. He had always been my rock, my confidant, but tonight, the familiar comfort of his presence felt different. It was as if an invisible barrier had risen between us, filled with the unspoken words we both feared to acknowledge. "Ethan," I finally said, breaking the silence that felt suffocating, "do you think Mom knows?" My voice trembled slightly, but I pressed on, searching for the truth in his eyes. He turned to me, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "I don't know, Leela. She might suspect something, but she hasn't said anything. You know how she is," he replied, his voice low as if the walls themselves had ears. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I had witnessed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way her laughter had faded and her smiles had grown faint. It was a heartbreaking transformation that I couldn't ignore any longer. "I can't keep pretending everything is okay," I confessed, my heart racing as I spoke. "I see the pain in her eyes, and I can't just sit here and watch our family fall apart." The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to soothe an ache that went deeper than muscle and bone. "Neither can I," he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of our shared burdens. "But what are we supposed to do about it? It's not like we can just confront Dad and hope for the best. He'll deny everything." A sense of helplessness washed over me, and I could feel tears threatening to spill over. My brother was right. How could we confront the man who was supposed to be our protector? "We need to find a way to make her feel safe again," I said firmly, though uncertainty gnawed at my resolve. "I want her to know that she doesn't have to face this alone. If we stand together, maybe we can help her." Ethan looked at me, his blue eyes searching mine as if weighing my words. Finally, he nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Okay, let's figure out a plan," he said, a flicker of determination igniting in his expression. "But we have to be careful. If Dad finds out we're talking about this..." He trailed off, leaving the ominous implications hanging in the air. I knew he was right. We had to tread lightly in this fragile landscape. With a newfound sense of purpose, we began to brainstorm ways to approach our mother. wanting to create a safe space where she could share her feelings without fear of judgment or repercussions. I thought about all the evenings spent watching movies together, how those small moments had once fostered warmth in our home. Perhaps we could organize a family night, a chance to reconnect and remind her of the love that still existed beneath the surface. As we talked, the tension in the room began to dissipate slightly, replaced by a sense of solidarity. We might have been a fractured family, but we weren't completely broken. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me, a fragile flame that urged me to keep moving forward. The following evening, we set the plan into motion. Ethan suggested we bake cookies, something we used to do with Mom when we were younger. It had always been one of her favorite activities, a sweet reminder of simpler times. We gathered ingredients, laughing and joking as we measured flour and sugar, our spirits lifted by the familiar rhythm of the process. As the scent of freshly baked cookies filled the house, I felt a surge of nostalgia wash over me. Those were the moments I cherished, the warmth of family encapsulated in shared laughter and love. I hoped the simple act would serve as an invitation for my mother to join us, to reignite the connection that felt so painfully distant now. When Miriam finally wandered into the kitchen, her eyes widened in surprise. "What are you two up to?" she asked, her voice slightly hesitant. I exchanged a glance with Ethan before responding. "We thought we'd surprise you with some cookies. Want to help us decorate them?" A small smile broke through her worries as she moved closer. "I'd love that," she said, the warmth in her voice momentarily breaking through the ice that had formed around our family. We spent the next hour decorating cookies, laughter slowly creeping back into our exchanges as we recalled stories of our past. Yet, beneath the surface, I could sense that Miriam was still holding back, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I wanted so desperately to dive deeper, to peel away the layers of tension, but I knew I needed to approach her delicately. "Mom," I ventured cautiously after a moment of silence, "can we talk about, well, everything?" She looked at me, her expression wavering between hope and fear. I held my breath, knowing that this conversation could very well change the course of our family. "Yes, I think we need to," she finally admitted, her voice soft yet resolute. A wave of relief washed over me, mingled with the weight of uncertainty that lay ahead. In that moment, I realized that we were on the brink of something profound, a chance to lay bare the truths that had been hiding in the shadows for too long. As we sat together, surrounded by the warm glow of the kitchen, I felt the promise of healing begin to take root. Though the journey would be difficult, I believed in our ability to face it together. Family was about resilience, and despite the cracks forming in our foundation, love still flickered, waiting to be kindled anew. If you're enjoying this journey of Lila and her family, I invite you to subscribe for more. There's so much more to unravel in their story, and together we can explore the depths of love and healing. The days that followed felt like a blur of muted colors and hushed conversations. I couldn't shake the weight of my parents' unspoken truths, and every glance exchanged between them seemed laden with unresolved tension. Each evening at the dinner table, I would watch my mother's fingers trace the rim of her glass, a nervous habit I had never noticed before. It was as if she was searching for the right words to say, yet they remained trapped behind her carefully constructed facade. I tried to focus on the mundane details of my life, but they felt trivial compared to the storm brewing just beneath our roof. Ethan, my older brother, seemed to sense my turmoil. He had always been my protector, the one I could count on when the world felt too overwhelming. One afternoon, while I was sketching on the porch, he sat down next to me, his presence comforting yet heavy with the understanding that something was amiss. I looked up, trying to read his expression, but his eyes mirrored my confusion. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, as if afraid the wind might carry our conversation away. "I don't know," I admitted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I just feel like everything is falling apart." I dropped my pencil and let it roll off the edge of the table, a small act of rebellion against the weight of reality. Ethan's brow furrowed, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. He reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder, a gesture meant to comfort, but only deepened my anxiety. "Maybe we should talk to Mom and Dad," he suggested, his tone cautious. I shook my head, the very thought sending a wave of panic through me. What if they didn't want to discuss it? What if they brushed aside my concerns, insisting that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't? I had seen how my mother's eyes darkened when my father entered the room, as if a shadow of doubt loomed over them. "I don't think they'll listen," I replied, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. "Leela, we can't just pretend everything's normal, not when it's not," he urged, determination creeping into his voice. I wanted to believe him, but I also feared the fallout that would come from confronting the truth. What if our family shattered beyond repair? The idea gnawed at me, but I knew we couldn't remain trapped in this silence forever. Eventually, I nodded, albeit reluctantly. That night, when the house was hushed, I crept into the living room where my parents were. They sat together, seemingly engrossed in their own world. I hesitated at the threshold, listening to the soft sounds of their conversation. "I just don't understand why you can't see it from my perspective," my mother said, her voice strained. My heart raced as I realized they were already arguing, the very thing I wanted to avoid. Before I could retreat, Ethan stepped beside me, his presence grounding. "We need to talk to them," he whispered, his resolve steadying me. I took a deep breath and nodded, pushing the fear down as we entered the room together. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I felt as if we were stepping onto a battlefield. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They turned to face us, surprise mingling with apprehension. "We need to talk." For a moment, silence engulfed us. My mother's eyes darted between Ethan and me, while my father leaned forward, the tension palpable. "About what?" he asked, but I could hear the apprehension in his tone. It was as if he knew what was coming, and part of me wished he would just deny it all, insist that everything was fine. "About us," Ethan replied, his voice stronger than mine. "About the way things have been lately." My heart pounded in my chest as I felt my mother's gaze bore into me, urging me to continue. I took a breath, collecting my thoughts. "I don't think it's okay to keep pretending that we're fine when we're not. We can't ignore what's happening." The silence stretched, and I watched as my father's expression hardened, the corners of his mouth tightening as if bracing for impact. "Leela, sweetheart," he began, but Ethan cut him off. "No, just let us say what we need to say." I felt a sense of solidarity in Ethan's words, and I could see my mother's eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Mom, I see how you look at Dad. I see how you are when he's around. It's like you're holding your breath, waiting for something to happen." My voice trembled, but I pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. "It's tearing us apart, and I can't handle it anymore." Finally, my mother blinked away the tears and nodded slowly. "You're right," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I could keep it together for you two, but it's harder than I imagined." In that moment, I saw the weight of her struggles reflected in her eyes, and I felt a pang of empathy. Ethan stepped forward, his expression fierce. "We're a family. We deserve to know the truth, even if it hurts. But we can't fix this if we don't talk about it." My father looked between my mother and us, his expression shifting from defensiveness to uncertainty. He opened his mouth to speak, but I could see the conflict brewing within him. I couldn't help but wonder if he would finally face the reality he had been avoiding. We had opened the door to the truth, but now it hung before us, heavy and foreboding. Would we be able to cross the threshold together, or would this be the moment that broke us? The answer lay just ahead, waiting to unfold. As I sat there, the air heavy with unspoken words, I felt the weight of our silence. My father's gaze flickered to my mother, then back to me, as if searching for a way to bridge the chasm that had formed. I wanted to scream, to demand he explain the hurt that shadowed my mother's face. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the fear of shadowing whatever fragile facade we had left as a family. I remembered how my mother used to smile, the warmth in her laughter filling our home with light. Now, the shadows loomed like specters, taunting us with memories of happier times. Ethan's voice broke through my reverie, laden with a mixture of frustration and concern. "Dad, we can't just sit here pretending everything is fine. We need to talk about what's happening." His words, though harsh, were like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. I turned to him, grateful that he was willing to confront the truth. He had always been the protector, the one who faced challenges head-on, while I often hesitated, trapped in my own thoughts. Robert looked between Ethan and me, his brow furrowed with the weight of his choices. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough to ease my hurt. The reality of his infidelity loomed larger than his regret. I felt a mix of anger and sadness boiling within me, a maelstrom that threatened to spill over. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how he had shattered our lives, but instead, I found myself clenching my fists under the table, hoping to contain the tempest. Miriam sat motionless, her eyes glossed over, as if she were trying to distance herself from the scene. I could see her lips quivering slightly, and in that moment, my heart ached for her. She had always been the glue holding our family together, the one who nurtured us through every hardship. I couldn't bear to think of how much pain she must be feeling. "Mom, are you okay?" I finally ventured, my voice trembling. I needed her to acknowledge that we were all hurt, that we could still be a family if we faced this together. She blinked, and for a moment, the facade crumbled. "I don't know, Leela," she replied, her voice cracking. I never expected this from your father." The raw honesty in her words filled the room, and I felt a surge of compassion for her. I had been so focused on my own hurt that I had overlooked the depth of her suffering. In that instant, I realized that we were all victims of Robert's betrayal, caught in a web of lies and unfulfilled promises. "Dad, do you even understand what you've done?" Ethan's voice rose, the passion in his words burning brightly. "You've betrayed Mom, and it's tearing us apart. What were you thinking?" It was a question that hung heavily in the air, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for Robert's answer. The truth is, I wanted to know too. What could possibly justify the pain he had inflicted on us? Robert shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the table. I made a mistake," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I was weak." The admission was a small crack in his armor, but it didn't begin to repair the damage. My heart raced, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions swirling within me. Weakness? It felt like a cop-out, an excuse that failed to acknowledge the depth of his actions. "Do you even care how this affects us?" I blurted out, unable to contain my frustration. Losing trust isn't just a mistake, it's a scar that doesn't heal easily. My voice trembled, and I fought against the tears threatening to spill. I didn't want to be angry, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. "I know, Leela," Robert said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to do better, to fix this." His words felt hollow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were just a desperate attempt to appease us. I wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that he could change, but the doubt lingered in the corners of my mind like an unwanted guest. Ethan's expression hardened, a storm brewing in his eyes. "You say you want to fix things, but how? It's not that simple. You can't just erase what you've done." His words resonated in my heart, and I nodded in agreement. I felt a bond with my brother strengthen, a shared understanding of our struggle to navigate this new reality. Miriam finally spoke, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "We need to decide if we can heal from this together. but I won't pretend that everything will just go back to normal. Trust takes time, and I need to see that you truly want to change, Robert." Her words were a lifeline, a promise that our family wouldn't disintegrate without a fight. I looked at my father, searching for a flicker of sincerity, a sign that he understood the depth of his actions. The silence stretched, a fragile thread hanging in the balance. In that moment, I realized that the path ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but perhaps if we were willing to confront the truth together, we could begin to mend the wounds that had been inflicted. It would take time, and I knew that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but I felt a glimmer of hope flicker in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to reclaim our family, to rise from the ashes of betrayal and build something new. That thought, fragile as it was, sparked a flicker of determination within me. I would not let our story end like this. We had the power to rewrite our narrative, one step at a time. With each passing day, the weight of silence at home grew heavier, suffocating the remnants of normalcy we once enjoyed. I could see the cracks deepening in my parents' interactions. Every brief glance exchanged between Robert and Miriam held unspoken words, emotions pent up and threatening to overflow. Ethan, always perceptive, was retreating further into his world. A storm of confusion swirling just beneath the surface. The distance between us widened, each unshared truth acting as an invisible barrier, isolating us in our own individual battles. In moments when I found myself alone in my room, I would replay the dinner scene over and over in my mind. The way Miriam's smile faltered, how Robert's laughter seemed forced. It was as if I were watching a tragic play unfold, but I was also an unwilling participant trapped on the stage. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I longed to break free from this suffocating atmosphere and speak my mind. But each time I opened my mouth to voice my concerns, I faltered, worrying that my words might shatter what little was left of our family. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I found myself wandering through the nearby park, seeking solace among the trees that whispered secrets to the wind. I sat on a bench, the cool air brushing against my skin, trying to gather my thoughts. It was here that I felt a presence beside me. I turned to see Ethan, his brow furrowed with the weight of unspoken thoughts. We shared a moment of silence, the tension between us palpable yet comforting in its familiarity. "Do you think they'll ever be okay?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the question that had echoed in my mind countless times. "I want to believe they can," I replied, my heart aching with uncertainty. "But it's like they're trapped in their own pain, and I don't know how to reach them." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I keep thinking about how things used to be, when we were all laughing together and nothing felt broken." His tone was filled with nostalgia, and for a moment, I could see flashes of our happier memories dancing in his eyes. "Maybe we can help them," I suggested, the idea taking root in my mind. "If we can get them to talk, to face whatever it is that's keeping them apart, maybe there's still a chance." Ethan looked at me, the spark of hope reflected in his expression momentarily dimming my fears. "You really think so?" "I have to believe that," I said, feeling a swell of determination rise within me. "We owe it to them. We owe it to ourselves." Together, we concocted a plan. Over the next few days, we subtly nudged our parents into activities that would force them to interact without the barriers of their discomfort. It started with game nights, where we could draw them into laughter and friendly competition, reminding them of the joy we once shared. But as the nights wore on, I noticed that it wasn't enough. The tension simmered just below the surface, erupting at the slightest provocation. One night, while we played a board game, an argument flared between them over something trivial, a misplaced game piece, a comment taken the wrong way. In that moment, the facade crumbled, and the emotional baggage they had carried for so long burst forth like a dam breaking. I watched, helpless and heartbroken, as they hurled accusations at each other, unearthing years of resentment and hurt. I could feel my chest tightening, the air thick with despair. "Stop! Just stop!" I finally shouted, my voice cracking with urgency. Silence fell over the room, and both of them looked at me, startled by my outburst. "This isn't helping. We need to talk about what's really going on." Miriam and Robert exchanged glances, the anger in their eyes replaced by a flicker of surprise. It was the first time I had truly confronted them, and the gravity of the moment hung heavy in the air. "Please, let us in. We're hurting too. We can't pretend anymore." For a long moment, they were silent, the tension still simmering but shifting, morphing into something more vulnerable. I could see the hesitation in their expressions. The unspoken acknowledgement that they had both allowed their pain to eclipse the love that had once bound us as a family. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Lila. I didn't want you to see any of this." Miriam's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she reached for Robert's hand, the gesture a tentative bridge over the chasm that had formed between them. "We thought we could protect you by keeping our struggles hidden, but it seems we only drove us further apart." It was a small step, but it felt monumental. We spent the rest of the evening sharing our feelings, acknowledging the pain, the disappointment, and the confusion that had become a part of our lives. As we spoke, I felt the weight of secrets lifting, replaced by a tentative hope. In the days that followed, the atmosphere began to change, albeit slowly. Our conversations became more honest, our laughter more frequent. I could sense that we were all still fragile, but we were willing to fight for the love that connected us. It was a long road ahead, filled with the uncertainties of healing, but I was ready to take the journey. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had begun to chip away at the walls built from hurt, and I held onto the belief that we could rebuild our family. It was in this spirit of vulnerability and connection that I found the courage to share our story with others, hoping they too could find solace in the shared experiences of heartache and redemption. If you face similar struggles, I encourage you to reach out and share your journey. Together, we can learn to mend the bonds that matter most. As I stood in the dim light of my bedroom, the weight of the past few weeks pressed heavily on my chest. The sharp contrast of my room, a sanctuary filled with childhood memories, felt almost cruel against the storm raging in my heart. My gaze fell on the family photos tacked to the wall, each one a reminder of a time when laughter echoed through our halls and love felt like an unbreakable bond. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to gather my family together, and confront the fissures that had begun to tear us apart. I needed Ethan's strength, his unwavering support, but the tension between us had been palpable since that night at dinner when silence spoke louder than words. Taking a deep breath, I decided to find him. He was probably in the small study we had converted into a makeshift refuge for him, a place cluttered with books and old gaming consoles where he often lost himself in fictional worlds. As I walked down the hallway, I could hear the faint sound of a video game in progress, interspersed with his occasional frustrated groan. I knocked gently before entering, hoping to catch him in a moment of openness. "Ethan?" I ventured, stepping inside. His back was turned to me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The way he gripped the controller like it was a lifeline. I sat down across from him, waiting for him to acknowledge me. When he finally turned, his eyes held a mixture of surprise and exhaustion. "Leela," he said, his voice low, "what's up?" "I need to talk," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes as he paused the game, setting the controller down. He ran a hand through his hair, a habit he had when he was feeling overwhelmed. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted, looking down. "Me neither," I confessed. "But we can't keep avoiding it. This is tearing us apart, Ethan. It's like we're all just walking on eggshells." He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the screen where the game had frozen. Dad has really messed things up, hasn't he? The bluntness of his statement hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears gathering in my eyes.
I don't know how to look at him the same way anymore. It's like everything I believed has shattered. Ethan's expression softened, and he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I feel it too, but we can't let him destroy us. Mom, she's hurting, Leela. I see it in her eyes, but she won't talk about it. The mention of our mother brought a fresh wave of grief crashing over me. I want to help her. I want us to be a family again, but how do we even start? Ethan sighed, the weight of his own burdens evident on his face. Maybe we need to confront Dad together. We need to know why he did this and what he plans to do about it. The thought of facing Robert filled me with a mix of dread and determination. Are you sure? What if he just brushes us off? What if we don't get the answers we're looking for? We won't know unless we try, he said firmly. If we keep pretending everything is fine, it will only get worse. We can't let fear control us.
I took a moment to absorb his words, realizing he was right. The fear of confrontation had kept us in this cycle of silence, but it was also suffocating us. Okay, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's do it. Together. A flicker of hope ignited in Ethan's eyes. We should talk to Mom first. If she's on our side, we'll have a better chance of confronting Dad as a united front. Nodding, I felt a small surge of courage. Let's do it now. We left the study and made our way downstairs, the shadows of the house seeming to loom larger with each step. Our parents were in the living room, the faint glow of the television casting flickering shadows across their faces. Miriam sat on the couch, her fingers absent-mindedly twisting a strand of her hair, while Robert leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The tension was palpable as we approached them, a whirlwind of emotions swirling in my chest. I glanced at Ethan, who gave me a reassuring nod before I cleared my throat. Mom, Dad, we need to talk. Their heads turned toward us in unison, surprise etched on their faces. Miriam looked apprehensive, while Robert's expression shifted to one of guarded curiosity. What is it? Miriam asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan stepped forward. It's about what's been happening with our family. We can't just ignore it anymore. Robert straightened, a flicker of defensiveness in his demeanor. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, summoning all the strength I could muster. We need to discuss your infidelity, Dad. We need to understand why it happened and what it means for us going forward. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken emotions. I could see the shock on my mother's face, the way her lips parted in surprise. Robert's expression shifted, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't noticed before. Leela, He started, but I cut him off. No more excuses. We deserve to know the truth. As the words hung in the air, I felt a sense of release wash over me. No matter how painful the path ahead might be, I knew we had taken the first step towards healing. The truth could be our guiding light, even in the darkness that had shrouded our family for too long.